Welcome to the Nurturing Fathers Podcast, a show dedicated to helping men succeed at the most challenging and rewarding job they'll ever have, being a dad. Your hosts are Mark Perlman, the creator and founder of the Nurturing Fathers program,
in the prison.
and his son,
I've had
Corey
7
Perlman,
classes last night,
who facilitates the program at the Atlanta Federal
and
Penitentiary
it's an environment where,
and is also a father of 2 young children.
As a parental
it's time to add tools to your Nurturing Fathers toolbox. Mark and
so
Corey,
we've had a lot of time
take it
to
away.
discuss it. And you've always taught me, don't go in there with a judgmental mindset, go in there with an open mindset. You don't know what people have been through, and things of that nature, and just have a conversation. And I really try to do that. And oftentimes I throw that ping pong ball, if you will, out into the group about hitting in general and let them kind of play with it for a while. There's so much that people kind of go through and all that. But one thing that we do really get down to that I think everybody comes out with is on the spectrum of discipline, or whatever you want to call it, consequences. You want the hitting part, if that is in your toolbox, to be at the far extreme of the spectrum. And what my job and what our job is in the Nurturing Fathers program is to provide so many other tools and opportunities for discipline that rarely, if ever, that one needs to be used. And I think everyone can agree with that.
And the other tools turn out to be more effective because they don't carry with it the baggage of us giving the kid a whack in the backside and telling him not to hit his baby sister anymore.
You remember, for the longest time, it's burned in my brain since I was a little kid, but I remember being in the sandbox with another kid, and the kid hit me, and his dad ran up, smacked him on the ass, and said, "We don't hit." I remember being like, 6, 8 years old, and being like, well, that's weird. I don't quite understand how that works.
Yeah, but we'll talk a lot more about this. We'll talk about the positive consequences, whole lists of them. We'll talk about the negative possibilities, the ones that are effective for bad behavior. But most importantly, on our probably podcast soon, we'll talk about the rules, the family rules, because kids need to know what exactly desired behavior is and what they're being measured by. It's all a learning, teaching enterprise.
And the biggest question that I ask in the class, and this is how I'm going to transition to my esteemed colleague that we're about to bring in here, is I always ask my class at the end of this discussion, the question that you've asked me, Dad, when we've had these deep conversations about using our hands or just physically putting them on our children is, do we want the fabric of our relationship with our kids to be fear? Do we want our kids to fear us? And I remember asking that question in a recent class that I did, the Atlanta Federal Prison. And I always have, Dad, someone who is what I call kind of like my, star student, all-star, whatever the case may be. There's just always one that I just have this energy with, that I just meet eyes with, and I can just be like, this guy gets it. And this was my guy. So I'm bringing him on. Reggie, are you there, bud?
Yes, sir. I am here.
Hello, Reggie.
How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. And I'm just happy to be here.
Nice to meet you,
Welcome
Reggie. You and I have never met in person, but Corey has certainly mentioned your name and talked about you as a dad.
Yes, sir. And I'm just happy to be here and hear you guys talk about all of the stuff that Corey had taught us. I was a part of the Nurturing Father program there at the federal prison, and man, I got a lot out of it. Everything that I've learned back home, to my wife, and I actually brought it home to my wife before I even made it home. So we started implementing a lot of this stuff before I even got home. And now, man, it has made a big difference in my kids and us as well, So the alternative to the corporal punishment, it's awesome.
I like you talking about you and your wife sharing this information, and the more we can go into this as a team, the stronger the whole program is, because if Dad does it one way and Mom does it another way, our kids are wired to find out the cracks in the system. It's going to make the whole thing a lot more difficult. So, Reggie, I wonder, before you took the Nurturing Fathers program, what was your orientation to discipline?
Me growing up, I grew up right here in Alabama, so in the South. I'm African-American. My parents both are African-American. And so I grew up with the belt, We would get what we call back in the day whippings for anything that we did wrong and stuff like that. And so that's how I grew up. And when I got my kids, when I had my first daughter, that was the first thing that, I did too, was the spankings, the Pow Pows, as my wife called it. And so that's how I grew up. And did I like it? No. And as I look back the stuff that I've learned now, and I look back and I see the flaws the disconnect, what it costs between me and my parents. And I now understand why I didn't want to tell my parents things. I kind of feared my parents instead of, being more open to them, and stuff like that. So I kind of looked at them as being the enemy. And, that's why I wouldn't tell them things. I would, I have questions about things, but they wouldn't be the ones that I would go to for the answer.
Yeah, that's a loss for them and for you. And it happens as a result of some of our disciplinary practices not being the go-to person, because then you find other people to go to. And it's a real lost opportunity, because I'm sure parents would most like our kids to come to us when they got tough questions or situations.
Yes, sir. And that was my childhood. And I turned to, the wrong friends for the advice that I should have gotten from my parents.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah,
Reggie, one thing that I remember talking to you about, really everybody, when somebody, and again, we always come to this conclusion on our own, but you'd come to me and you said, no more Pow Pows. I remember the day you said,
That's right.
My wife and I are committed to no more Pow Pows. And one of the things, and I said this to the class this past week, is when you decide to pull away or pull out a tool that you've had or used or whatever, we always have to recognize that you got to put some tools in, right? I mean, there's got to be some ways to discipline, right? So they can't go wild and crazy. So what did you guys put in instead of Pow Pows?
Okay, well, the alternative that we use is we use the taking away of the toys or the things that they love. And I remember you telling that story, Corey, about one of the inmates that gave you he gave you an illustration about, why are the kids' toys so important to them and stuff like that. And it's just like, me asking you, hey, can I have the keys to your house, and then
Right.
their house. So we take away the toys, we do timeout, and we do no playtime, no going outside. We have enforced a lot of rules that we have sat down, and the book say we sat down and we came up with these rules together. That way they will understand them. And just like with my son, he's in first grade, but when he would do things at school, and then I'll be like, oh, man, Philip, just say he got in trouble at school or he talked out of turn. My wife had a good relationship with the teacher or anything that he does negative, I would go to him instead of, him fearing me or giving him Pow Pows. He would tell me what he did. Used to he wouldn't want to tell me because I guess, he would be feared that I would give him Pow Pow. But now he would tell me what he did. And then I'll be like, so you know what this mean, right? He said, yes, sir, this mean that I can't go outside and play. And so he don't fear me. He know what the consequences are, and he's more receptive to that,
Right. It sounds more like you're working on it together, more like you're a team.
Yes, sir. I'm more disappointed, just like he is, because he can't go outside. I'm like, oh man, it's sunny out here today, Philip, and man, you could be riding your bike with your sister. But now you have to be in the house and you have to do this extra homework or something like that, whatever me and my wife enforce are the rules.
Right. And I can see that the total focus for you and the child and everybody involved is on the learning experience where he can learn what responsible behavior is and the consequence of getting that right and the other consequence of getting it wrong when you blow it. And it's practice for the child. They will continue to make mistakes. It doesn't mean they're quote unquote bad. They're being kids, but slowly but surely they will be oriented towards staying within the lines and the rewards of good behavior. It's very powerful. And they love to see that big smile on dad's face and get the pat on the back. That is as strong a reinforcement as anything.
Let me ask you a quick question. After hearing a little bit of kind of Reggie's story, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, Pops. When you hear a story like his, and specifically where, you think back to all the different generations in his family kind of doing the same type of discipline, and then you hear somebody like Reggie take what he learned in the Nurturing Fathers program, change some practices in the way they're moving forward and potentially for generations, in the future. How does that make you feel?
Oh, it makes me feel wonderful to be a part of it. That's essentially why I do this work. You see, my passion is for the well-being of children. and they'll become the adults, and then their children, and then they'll become the adults and their children. So it's a generational thing. And the changes that Reggie is talking about undertaking here, his children will do it more his way. They'll do it differently. So that generation of parenting, if you will be shifted in another direction that is probably more successful for the child. And then that will continue in the future. So the ripples that go out for that are probably beyond what we'll see in some of our lifetime. Although I see it, one of the beautiful things about being a grandfather is I see you, Corey, parent your kids. And that is an incredible thing for a parent to see. And seeing you work things out, not always getting it perfect, but being smart enough to ask and get input and change things if you need to. You and Jessica do an incredibly wonderful job, and you got two incredible kids, I might say, because they're my own grandkids as well. But so yes, we do see some of the outcome, but that will change the track of a generation for the better.
That's right.
Very powerful.
I agree. And Reggie, I just want to also say to you, man, like, I think I told you this when we first met, when you look back, you look at your legacy and things of that nature, and you, like Dad just said, you changed that ripple. There was a ripple that had been created before you, and you came in and you were the one to create that everlasting change in the dynamic between father and son and father and daughter for future generations to come. That's really powerful, man. That's your legacy.
Thank you so much. And I really, me and my wife both, we love the way we parent these kids now and stuff. And one thing that me and my wife both, I grew up in poverty, and one thing that I wanted to do was change that when I was growing up as well. I didn't want to live in poverty. I didn't want to live from paycheck to paycheck. And I got blessed to not have to live that way. So, and then now this is another thing that's added on to it as far as the corporal punishment thing to the kids and stuff like that. And because I want to give the power to, I don't want to be power over, that's my whole thing. And I just love the book. Me and my wife, we sit down, we look at it and stuff like that. And she and I explain this stuff. And I took a bunch of notes that I brought with me. And she totally understand it. And she can see to where kids could be scared of the parents and how the parent could power over kids instead of giving them the power and letting them, choose and stuff like that. So, yeah, it's a really good thing. And I really love it. Thank you guys for this.
Thank you.
Of course.
Really nice to hear it come back from your experience and your lips to hear about it, because that's really what it's all about. If we can plant that seed in different men around the country, around the world, every ethnicity, Hispanic, Black, White, Asian, American, Indian, the kind of change that puts a huge smile on my face.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
We can change the world.
Thank you too, Reggie.
Now my kids is going to pass this down to their kids, and it's going to continue to go on down the line, and it's just going to make a huge difference. And maybe other parents could look at this, and we told my cousins and stuff about how we're parenting and no Pow Pows and stuff like that. And at first they was like, what, and stuff like that. But after they see how our kids react to it and stuff like that, so they are really curious about it now. So.
That's great.
Good word.
That's right. Well, I think that's a good time. I've got my son going, Daddy, Daddy. So I can't think of a better reason to end a Nurturing Fathers podcast than your kid, nipping at your shoe, wanting to go play or something. So
give him a hug for me. Reggie,
right.
Nice to meet you, my friend. Good luck.
Yeah, Reggie, man, thank you so much for being a part of this. You were our first guest, by the way.
Yes,
so you
sir.
get the first guest award. It won't be the last time. We'll get you back on here at some point. But
yes,
you are the reason, man, that I get so excited about doing this kind of thing, man, is that, the relationships that I get to foster inside, these classes, and we get so connected. And I'm just excited to see, how your life unfolds now that you're home with your family. So we love you, buddy. And thanks for being on here, man.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. And you guys have a great day.
Don't forget to praise your kids for what they do right. And you and I will do discipline at least on another 3 of these with family rules.
That sounds like a plan.
Praise and consequences, and we'll kind of lay out the details a little bit more. I think it's a great start. I appreciate Reggie being on here and sharing what his journey was.
Yeah, and last but not least, if you were listening to this at all, got inspired about what Reggie or my dad or anybody else said on this, and you want to get more involved, nurturingfathers.com is a great place to come and get connected with us. We got a Facebook page, facebook.com/nurturingfathers, to come enjoy the conversation, give us a little comment, and we'd really appreciate a review of this podcast too. If you enjoyed it, got something out of it, go over to iTunes, wherever you're listening to this, and put a quick 5-star rating and tell us hopefully that you enjoyed it. And we'll look forward to seeing you again on the next one. So thank you, Dad. Thank you, Reggie. And thanks everyone for listening. Have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Nurturing Fathers podcast. Have questions or comments? Join the conversation at facebook.com/nurturingfathers or email us at nurturingfathers@gmail.com.